The late afternoon sun spread a golden glow across the city of Cagliari. The narrow cobbled streets wound like secret passages between faded ochre walls and balconies filled with blooming geraniums. Seagulls circled above the harbor, their cries carried on the warm Mistral wind. Matteo Serra had just stepped off the small ferry from Carloforte, his leather satchel pressed tightly against his side. He had been away for years, working in the north, but something had pulled him back to Sardinia's southern heart. The old city of Castello stood above him, its medieval towers casting long shadows. It was as if the place itself had been waiting. As Matteo climbed the steep stone steps towards Piazza Yen, he noticed a young woman sketching on a wooden bench. Her name was Lucia Contini, known in the neighborhood as a gifted painter with a restless spirit. She lifted her gaze as if she had felt him coming before she saw him. For a fleeting moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Not far away, hidden beneath the arches of Via Roma, a man in a dark linen suit leaned against a column. His name was Dario Pires, a figure whispered about in the markets and cafes. Some said he was a businessman. Others said his hands were in darker trades. When he spotted Matteo, a thin smile curved across his face, though Matteo never saw it. Night began to fall, the city shifting from its golden glow to the flicker of lanterns and cafe lights. Musicians played accordions on the terraces, and voices rose with the smell of grilled fish and roasted peppers. Yet in that beauty there was a quiet weight, as if unseen threads were already binding the lives of Matteo, Lucia, and Dario together. By the time Matteo reached the square, he felt it too, though he could not name it. A story was waiting for him in the streets of Cagliari, one that had begun long before he had returned, and one that would not let him walk away so easily. The Whisper in the Market. Morning light spilled across San Benedetto Market, filling the vast hall with voices, colors, and the smell of the sea. Stalls overflowed with swordfish, crimson prawns, and baskets of figs still wet with dew. Matteo walked between the counters, his eyes searching, though he wasn't sure for what. He had always loved the market as a child. Now it seemed louder, busier, yet beneath the noise he caught something else. An old fisherman, his hands rough as the stones of Poeto Beach, leaned close to Matteo as he bought a piece of bread. With a voice like gravel he murmured, "Watch your steps, Sarah. The city remembers more than you think." Before Matteo could reply, the man had vanished into the crowd, swallowed by the tide of sellers and buyers. Not far away, Lucia sketched the life of the market. Her charcoal danced across the paper, capturing faces with uncanny detail. When she noticed Matteo again, she smiled faintly, as if surprised but not displeased to see him. She asked why he had returned, but Matteo only shook his head, unwilling to answer. From the balcony above, Dario Pires observed the scene. He spoke to a companion in low Sardinian dialect, his words lost in the hum of the crowd. Yet his gaze never left Matteo, as if the young man's presence disturbed some long-buried plan. When Matteo finally stepped out into the bright street, the old words echoed inside him. The city remembers more than you think. He felt the walls of Cagliari pressing closer, its stones whispering secrets he had yet to uncover. The echo in the cathedral. The Cathedral of Santa Maria stood at the heart of Castello, its Romanesque facade worn by centuries of salt and wind. Inside, cool shadows wrapped around Matteo as he lit a candle, the scent of incense heavy in the air. He had not come for prayer. He had come for silence. Yet even here, whispers found him. As he sat in the pew, a folded piece of parchment slid across the wooden bench beside him. No one was there. Only the flicker of flames and the low chant of a priest preparing for evening mass. The note bore a single line, "The debt of your father is not forgotten." Matteo froze. His father had died 10 years ago, a quiet man who had left few words behind. Debt was not something he had ever spoken of. Matteo folded the note tightly, the paper trembling in his hand. At the far end of the nave, Lucia entered, unaware of his discovery. She came to sketch the marble lions at the altar, her presence like a shaft of light in the heavy silence. Matteo almost called her name, but the weight of the note held him back. Outside, Dario waited in the square, the shadow of a cigarette smoke curling in the dusk. He seemed to know exactly what Matteo had found inside, though his face betrayed nothing but calm patience. The game had begun, and Cagliari itself was the board. That night, the Mistral wind rattled shutters across the old quarter. Matteo wandered the alleys of Castello, chasing memories half-formed and unsettling. A turn led him to an iron gate he had never noticed before, set into the wall beneath Bastiani di Saint Remy. The lock was broken. Beyond lay a narrow stone stair, spiraling downward into darkness. With only the glow of his lighter, Matteo descended, the air damp with salt. The steps opened into a chamber carved from limestone, its walls etched with names and dates, some centuries old. In the center lay a wooden chest, half-rotted, its lid ajar. Inside were scraps of parchment, maps of the city, and ledgers marked with numbers and names. His father's name appeared more than once, written in bold ink beside debts owed. Some had been crossed out. Others remained, one marked with a symbol he did not recognize. Above, footsteps echoed faintly. Someone else was near. Matteo doused the flame and pressed himself into the wall, holding his breath. A voice spoke, low and firm. It was Dario, instructing someone unseen. They spoke of ledgers, of power, of a return that must be controlled. Matteo realized then that his father's past was not only remembered. It was alive, and he had stepped straight into its grasp. Days passed, yet Matteo carried the weight of the chest's discovery. He met Lucia on the terrace of a cafe overlooking Via Mano, the city stretching below in the haze of afternoon heat. She watched him carefully, sketchbook on her lap. "You have the eyes of someone chased by shadows," she said softly. Matteo tried to dismiss it, but when she showed him her drawings, his heart faltered. Among the portraits of strangers were faces he recognized, the fisherman, the priest, even Dario. She had never met them, yet she had drawn them in exact likeness, as if her hand was guided by something beyond sight. When Matteo asked how she knew them, Lucia lowered her gaze. "I dream of them," she whispered. "I dream of things that come before they happen." The revelation unsettled him more than the ledgers. If her gift was true, then her presence in his life was not chance. And if her visions were tied to the shadows gathering around him, the danger was far greater than he had imagined. At the edge of the square, Dario's men lingered, their eyes cold, their silence sharp. The circle was closing in, and Matteo could no longer pretend he was a visitor in his own city. He was a player in something older, deeper, and far more dangerous. The sea was black beneath the moon as Matteo walked the sand of Poeto, the lights of the city shimmering in the distance. He had come to escape the walls, but the whispers of the past followed him even here. Lucia appeared from the darkness, her hair blown wild by the wind. She carried another sketch, one she had not dared show in the cafe. It was of Matteo himself, standing before a door of stone carved with the same strange symbol he had seen in the ledgers. "I do not know where this door is," she said, her voice trembling, "but it is waiting for you." Before Matteo could answer, headlights cut across the sand. A car rolled to a halt, and 3 figures stepped out, their suits dark against the pale shore. They called his name, their voices carrying the weight of a command. Matteo grasped Lucia's hand, pulling her into the dunes. The chase began, the sand swallowing their steps as engines roared behind them. Shots cracked in the night, scattering gulls into the sky. They barely escaped, breathless and shaken, collapsing among the reeds. Matteo knew then that running was no longer enough. He would need to face the door, wherever it was, and the truth it guarded. Days later, guided by Lucia's sketches and a fading memory of his father's tales, Matteo found himself at the cliffs of Kalamosca. The sea crashed below, the limestone walls towering above like a fortress. There, half hidden by moss and wild grass, he found it. The stone door, carved with the symbol from the ledger, its lines cut deep as if by ancient hands. As he touched it, the rock seemed to pulse, cold and alive. The door shifted, revealing a tunnel that descended into the cliff itself. The air was stale, yet laced with the faint scent of oil and metal. Lucia clutched his arm, her eyes wide with the weight of her visions. Inside lay a cavern filled with chests like the one beneath Castello. Ledgers stacked high, maps spread wide, and weapons resting in the shadows. This was no memory of the past. It was a hidden empire, built on debts and silence. Before they could retreat, torches flared behind them. Dario had followed. His voice echoed off the walls, calm and certain. "Welcome home, Sarah. You have inherited more than a name." Dario's men surrounded the cavern, their torches painting the limestone with firelight. Matteo stood between the ledgers and the man who claimed dominion over them. Dario spoke of history, of families bound by debts, of power passed through generations. Matteo's father, he said, had been part of it, bound by a pact sealed in blood and silence. Matteo's return was no accident. It was destiny. Lucia's sketches scattered on the cavern floor, each page showing fragments of what was unfolding. Faces of men now standing before them, weapons gleaming in their hands. Matteo refused the role Dario placed upon him, but the cavern seemed to answer differently. The walls echoed with old names, old promises, as if the stones themselves demanded the pact be fulfilled. With every word, the pressure mounted. Matteo realized he was trapped not only by men but by the weight of a city's hidden history. To resist would mean war. To surrender would mean losing himself. The plan was made to meet at the harbor, under the cover of night, where ships swayed against their moorings and the air reeked of salt and tar. Matteo and Lucia had sought allies, men and women who had also suffered beneath the pact. Together, they aimed to break the chain of silence. But trust is a fragile thing in Cagliari shadows. As they gathered near the warehouses, footsteps approached. Figures emerged from the dark, more than expected. Among them was the fisherman who had warned Matteo in the market. Only now his warning felt like a lure. He had betrayed them, delivering their plan into Dario's hands. Torches lit the harbor as Dario's men closed in. The water reflected fire, and the sound of chains clattered against the hulls. Matteo felt the trap tighten, his father's debt now burning into his own flesh. Lucia whispered that she had seen this moment in her dreams, but even she could not see beyond it. The path was closing, the city itself holding its breath. Flames licked the night sky as Castello burned. The battle had spilled into the ancient streets, stone walls glowing red as smoke curled over the towers. The pact was no longer hidden in ledgers. It was alive, unleashed upon the city. Matteo fought through the chaos, his satchel filled with the ledgers he had torn from the cavern. Lucia stumbled beside him, clutching her sketches as if they were armor. Every corner turned revealed enemies, every alley a trap. Yet the fire drove them forward, erasing the old shadows with its furious light. At the heart of the district, upon the steps of Bastiani di Saint Remy, Matteo faced Dario for the final time. The city stretched below, ablaze with the weight of centuries. Dario spoke of destiny once more, but his words were drowned by the roar of flames and the cries of a city tearing itself free. Steel clashed, shouts rose, and the night cracked with the sound of finality. When the dust settled, the pact of silence had been broken, though at a cost that would linger in every stone of Cagliari. The shadows had been cast into fire. Yet even in the smoke, the city whispered still.